I am sitting in my small apartment right now holding an engagement ring I just bought for the woman I love. 4 years ago, my own mother kicked me out of our family home because of Katerina, my stepfather's daughter. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and barely enough money to survive. I never imagined that life would turn around in ways that Katerina herself could never have predicted. Sometimes, the people who push you into the darkness are the same ones who unknowingly lead you toward the light. Before I tell you everything that happened, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If stories about family betrayal and unexpected karma resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a quiet suburb just outside of Chicago, Illinois. My childhood was simple, but filled with warmth. My father worked as a mechanic and my mother stayed home to raise me. We did not have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. I remember summer evenings sitting on the porch with my dad, listening to him talk about cars and life. He had this way of making everything seem manageable, no matter how tough things got. He would say, "Marcus, as long as you stay honest and work hard, life will take care of you." I believed him with my whole heart. Everything changed when I was 12 years old. My father was driving home from work one rainy October night when a truck ran a red light and hit his car. He died instantly. The police officer who came to our door that night had tears in his eyes when he told my mother. I remember her collapsing onto the floor, screaming his name. That sound still haunts me sometimes. In one moment, our whole world shattered into pieces we could never put back together. After my father passed, my mother became a different person. She was still loving, still devoted to me, but there was a sadness in her eyes that never fully went away. She took 2 jobs to keep us afloat. During the day, she worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm downtown. At night, she stocked shelves at a grocery store 3 blocks from our house. I barely saw her, but when I did, she always made sure to tell me she loved me. She would say, "You are my everything, Marcus. We will get through this together." Those words kept me going through the hardest years. I did everything I could to make her proud. I studied hard, got good grades, and started working small jobs around the neighborhood as soon as I was old enough. I mowed lawns, shoveled snow, walked dogs. Every dollar I earned, I gave half to my mother to help with bills. She would cry sometimes when I handed her the crumpled bills, telling me I should keep it for myself. But I could not stand watching her work herself to exhaustion while I did nothing. When I was 16 years old, my mother met Gerald at a charity event hosted by our local church. Gerald was a widower in his early 50s who worked as a mid-level manager at a construction company. He was polite, soft-spoken, and seemed genuinely interested in my mother's well-being. At first, I was skeptical. No one could replace my father, and I did not trust this stranger who suddenly appeared in our lives. But Gerald made an effort to connect with me. He took me to baseball games, helped me with homework, and never tried to act like he was my new dad. He would say, "I know I'm not your father, Marcus. I just want to be someone you can count on." My mother started smiling again. The heaviness in her eyes began to lift, and I could see glimpses of the woman she used to be before my father died. For her sake, I accepted Gerald into our lives. After about a year of dating, they got married in a small ceremony at the same church where they met. I was 17 years old, standing beside my mother as she said her vows, hoping that this new chapter would bring her the happiness she deserved. What I did not fully understand at the time was that Gerald came with baggage of his own. He had a daughter from his first marriage named Katerina. She was 2 years older than me, 19 at the time, and attending a community college about 20 minutes from our house. Gerald talked about her constantly, always with a tone of deep concern. He explained that Katerina had struggled ever since her mother passed away from cancer 5 years earlier. He said she was sensitive, fragile, and needed extra care and understanding. The first time I met Katerina, she seemed perfectly normal. She was friendly, talkative, and went out of her way to make conversation with me. She asked about my school, my hobbies, my friends. She laughed at my jokes and told me she always wanted a younger brother. I thought maybe I had been wrong to worry. Maybe having a stepsister would actually be nice. Maybe our blended family could work. But small things started bothering me almost immediately. Katerina asked a lot of questions about my mother's finances. She wanted to know how much the house was worth, what kind of savings my mother had, whether my father left any inheritance. When I told her, these questions made me uncomfortable. She laughed it off and said she was just curious. She also made strange comments comparing our house to the one she grew up in, always implying that her childhood home was better, bigger, more impressive. Once she mentioned that her mother had died young because she worked too hard, taking care of other people. The way she looked at my mother when she said it made my stomach turn. I told myself I was being paranoid. Katerina was still adjusting to a new family, just like I was. People say awkward things when they are nervous. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and focus on making our new family work. The first 2 years after my mother married Gerald were relatively peaceful on the surface. I graduated high school with honors and got accepted into the University of Illinois at Chicago to study business administration. It was not an Ivy League school, but it was affordable, close to home, and had a solid reputation. My mother cried happy tears when I showed her the acceptance letter. She said my father would have been so proud. That moment meant everything to me. Katerina, meanwhile, dropped out of community college halfway through her second year. She claimed she was dealing with mental health issues and needed time to focus on herself. Gerald supported her decision completely and convinced my mother to let Katerina stay at home without working. He said, "She has been through a lot since her mother passed. She just needs time and love to heal." My mother, always wanting to keep the peace, agreed without question. So Katerina stayed home while I went to school and worked part-time at a coffee shop near campus. She did not cook, clean, or contribute to the household in any way. My mother took care of everything for her. She prepared Katerina's meals, did her laundry, and even gave her spending money every week. When I pointed out that this arrangement seemed unfair, Gerald got defensive. He said, "You do not understand what she is going through. You still have your mother." The implication was clear. Because my mother was alive, my struggles did not count. My mother said nothing in my defense, just looked at the floor and asked me to let it go. I tried to focus on my own life and ignore the growing tension at home. I worked hard at school, maintained a 3.7 GPA, and saved every penny I could from my coffee shop job. Over 6 months, I managed to save $3,000 for my upcoming tuition payment. I kept the money in a joint account I shared with my mother, the same account my parents had opened when I was a child. I trusted her completely. That trust was about to be shattered. One afternoon, I logged into my bank account to check my balance before making the tuition payment. My heart stopped. The account showed only $214. Nearly $3,000 had vanished overnight. I called my mother immediately, my hands shaking as I held the phone. She answered on the third ring, her voice already apologetic, before I said a word. "Marcus, I was going to tell you," she said. Katerina needed the money. She had therapy appointments piling up, and there were some personal expenses she could not cover. Gerald asked me to help, and I did not know how to say no. I could barely breathe. "Mom, that was my tuition money. I worked 6 months for that. Do you have any idea how many hours I spent making coffee and cleaning tables to save that much?" She started crying, saying Gerald had pressured her, saying Katerina had threatened to hurt herself if she did not get the money. She promised she would pay me back as soon as she could. But I knew the truth. There was no money to pay back. Gerald controlled their finances now, and every spare dollar went to Katerina. I had to borrow money from 3 different friends to make my tuition payment that semester. It took me 2 years to pay them all back, working extra shifts and skipping meals to save money. My mother never mentioned repaying me again. The subject became something we did not discuss, a wound that festered in silence between us. That was the first betrayal, but it was far from the last. During my junior year of college, I started dating a girl named Megan. She was smart, kind, and studying to become a nurse. We met in a statistics class and bonded over our shared hatred of probability problems. For the first time since my father died, I felt like I had found someone who truly understood me. I was happy in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. Megan came to my house for dinner one weekend to meet my family. Katharina was unusually friendly that night, almost aggressively so. She complimented Megan's hair, her clothes, her choice of major. She asked detailed questions about Megan's family and background. At the time, I thought Katharina was just trying to be welcoming. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Megan broke up with me. She would not look me in the eye when she did it. She just said, "I heard some things about you that I cannot ignore. I think we should stop seeing each other." When I pressed her for details, she finally admitted that Katharina had been messaging her privately. Katharina told Megan that I had serious psychological problems, that I had been violent with her in the past, that I was unstable and potentially dangerous. Every word was a lie. I had never raised a hand to anyone in my life. I confronted Katharina that same night, demanding to know why she would say such horrible things. She immediately burst into tears and ran to Gerald, claiming I was threatening her. Gerald stormed into my room and called me a bully. He demanded I apologize to Katharina for upsetting her. My mother stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, and said, "Marcus, please let us just keep the peace." Keep the peace. Those 3 words became a prison I could not escape. Every time Katharina hurt me, every time she lied or manipulated or stole my mother, asked me to keep the peace. My feelings did not matter. My truth did not matter. The only thing that mattered was making sure Katharina was happy. After I graduated from college, I received a job offer from a financial services firm in downtown Chicago. It was an entry-level position, but it paid well and had excellent growth potential. I was thrilled. This was my chance to finally become independent, to build a life on my own terms. I came home that evening, excited to share the news with my mother. She hugged me and said she was proud, but Gerald barely acknowledged my accomplishment. Katharina, who had recently married a man named Derek, rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath. Later that night, I overheard her telling my mother, "He thinks he is better than us now. Just because he got some fancy office job, he thinks he can look down on everyone." Katharina had married Derek about 6 months earlier. He was 30 years old, worked as a project manager at a mid-sized technology company, and never missed an opportunity to brag about his salary and position. Their wedding was an expensive affair that my mother and Gerald largely paid for. I was not asked to be part of the wedding party. Instead, I was seated at a table in the back corner of the reception hall with distant relatives no one had spoken to in years. During her speech, Katharina mentioned me exactly once, saying, "My stepbrother is a bit antisocial. We are working on including him more." The guests laughed. I sat there in silence, wondering how I had become the villain in my own family's story. 2 months after Katharina's wedding, the final confrontation happened. I came home late one Friday night after celebrating my new job with some coworkers. We had gone to a bar downtown, and I took a cab home around 11. The house was dark when I arrived, except for a light in the living room where Gerald, my mother, and Katharina were waiting. Katharina stood up the moment I walked in. Her face was red and tear-stained, her voice shaking with what I now recognize as rehearsed emotion. "Where is it, Marcus? Where is my mother's necklace?" I had no idea what she was talking about. She accused me of sneaking into her room while everyone was asleep and stealing a gold necklace that had belonged to her late mother. She said it was the only thing she had left of her, that it was priceless and irreplaceable. Gerald demanded I empty my pockets and let them search my room. I agreed immediately because I had nothing to hide. They found nothing, of course, because I had taken nothing. I asked them to check the security cameras that Gerald had installed around the house 2 years earlier. Gerald's face tightened. He said the cameras had malfunctioned that day and did not record anything. The coincidence was too perfect to be accidental, but no one seemed to care. Katharina kept crying, insisting I was a thief. Gerald stood beside her, with his arm around her shoulders, glaring at me like I was a stranger who had broken into his home. And my mother, the woman who had promised we would get through everything together, stood in the middle of the room with tears running down her cheeks, saying nothing. Finally, Gerald spoke. "Linda, you need to make a choice. Either he leaves this house or Katharina and I will move out. I cannot have my daughter living under the same roof as someone who would steal from her. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me, waiting for her to say something, anything that acknowledged the truth. Instead, she looked at the floor and said, "Marcus, I think it is best if you find your own place. Just for now. Until things calm down. Just for now. Until things calm down." Empty words that meant nothing. I understood in that moment that I had already lost her. She had chosen Katharina over me, chosen peace over truth, chosen her new family over her own son. I packed my belongings that night. Everything I owned fit into one suitcase and a backpack. I had $312 in my wallet and nowhere to go. As I walked toward the front door, Katharina was standing at the top of the stairs watching me. She smiled and said, "Good luck out there, little brother." I did not respond. I just walked out into the cold Chicago night and did not look back. The first few months after I left home were the hardest of my life. I rented a tiny room in a rundown building on the south side of Chicago. The walls were thin, the heating barely worked, and I could hear my neighbors arguing through the floor every night. But it was mine. It was the first space I had ever had that no one could take from me. I threw myself into work. I was determined to prove that I could succeed without my family's support. During the day, I worked at the financial firm, learning everything I could about the industry. At night, I delivered food for extra cash sometimes, working until 2 in the morning just to make rent. I barely slept, barely ate, but I kept moving forward because stopping meant drowning in the pain I was trying to outrun. For the first year, I did not contact my mother or anyone else from that house. Some nights, lying alone in my small room, I wondered if she ever thought about me. I wondered if she regretted her choice, if she ever picked up the phone to call me and then changed her mind. But the phone never rang, and eventually I stopped waiting. Slowly, things began to improve. My hard work at the firm did not go unnoticed. After my first year, I was promoted from administrative assistant to junior analyst. The raise was modest, but it meant I could afford a slightly better apartment and stop working delivery shifts every night. I started sleeping more than 4 hours for the first time in months. It was during my second year at the company that I met Emma. She worked in the human resources department and was assigned to lead a training session for new analysts. I remember walking into the conference room that morning, exhausted and distracted, and then seeing her standing at the front of the room. She had this presence that immediately commanded attention, but not in an intimidating way. She was warm, articulate, and had a smile that made the fluorescent office lights seem less harsh. We started talking during the coffee break. She asked about my background, and I gave her the sanitized version, the one without family betrayal and stolen money and false accusations. But something about the way she listened made me want to tell her more. Over the following weeks, we began eating lunch together regularly. She told me about growing up in Minnesota, about her dream of eventually becoming a therapist, about her complicated relationship with her own family. In return, I slowly opened up about my past, testing her reactions to each painful detail. Emma never judged me. When I told her about Katharina and the accusations, she said, "That says everything about who they are and nothing about who you are." When I told her about my mother choosing her new family over me, Emma took my hand and said, "Your past does not define your worth, Marcus. The people who truly love you will see that." I fell in love with her gradually, then all at once. After 6 months of friendship, I finally asked her on a proper date. She said yes without hesitation. That first date turned into a second, then a third, then countless evenings spent talking and laughing and discovering all the ways we fit together. 3 years after I was kicked out of my mother's house, my life had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. I had been promoted to senior financial analyst at Harrison Financial Group, one of the most respected firms in the Chicago area. I was earning more money than I ever imagined possible, living in a comfortable apartment in Lincoln Park, and sharing my life with the most incredible woman I had ever known. Emma and I had been together for 2 years, living together for 1. Every day with her felt like a gift I did not deserve, but was grateful for anyway. She made me believe in family again, not the family I was born into, but the family we were building together. I planned the proposal for months. I wanted everything to be perfect. I chose Millennium Park, the same place where we had our first official date. I bought a ring with money I had saved specifically for this purpose, refusing to finance it or go into debt. I wanted this moment to be completely mine, untouched by the financial struggles of my past. On a cool autumn evening with the Chicago skyline glittering behind us, I got down on one knee and asked Emma to marry me. She started crying before I even finished the question. "Yes, Marcus," she said. 1,000 times yes. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. I had found my person, my home, my future. The pain of my past had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something I could carry without being crushed by it. 2 weeks after our engagement, I was assigned to evaluate a potential business partner for Harrison Financial Group. This was a routine part of my job. I reviewed company financials, assessed project performance, and made recommendations about whether partnerships would be beneficial. The company in question was called Technova Solutions, a mid-sized technology firm looking to expand their operations with our financial backing. I began my review methodically examining their quarterly reports, project timelines, and management structure. Everything seemed standard at first. Then I noticed the name listed under Senior Project Management, Derek Thompson. My blood ran cold. Derek, Katharina's husband. The man who had laughed at Gerald's jokes while I was being accused of theft. The man who had sat beside Katharina at their expensive wedding while I was hidden away at a back table like a shameful secret. I stared at his name for a long time, processing what this meant. I had 2 choices. I could recuse myself from the evaluation, citing a personal conflict of interest. Or I could proceed professionally, evaluating Technova the same way I would evaluate any other company, letting the numbers speak for themselves. I chose to proceed, not because I wanted revenge, but because I believed in doing my job with integrity regardless of personal circumstances. If Technova was a solid company, my evaluation would reflect that. If there were problems, those problems existed independent of my history with Derek. The problems were significant. As I dug deeper into Technova's records, red flags appeared everywhere. Their financial reports contained inconsistencies that suggested either incompetence or deliberate manipulation. Several major projects were severely behind schedule and over budget. Client satisfaction scores had plummeted over the past 18 months. 3 of the worst performing projects were directly under Derek's management. His teams had missed every major deadline, exceeded budgets by an average of 40%, and generated numerous client complaints. Either Derek was spectacularly bad at his job or something more serious was happening. Either way, the evidence was damning. I compiled my findings into a comprehensive report and submitted it to my supervisors. I included every relevant detail, positive and negative, without editorial commentary or personal bias. The numbers told their own story. 2 weeks later, Harrison Financial Group officially declined the partnership with Technova. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Without our investment, Technova was forced to downsize significantly. An internal review exposed additional problems beyond what I had uncovered. Several managers were terminated, including Derek Thompson, whose projects had cost the company millions in losses, and damaged client relationships. I did not expect to hear from anyone in my former family ever again. After 4 years of silence, I assumed they had moved on with their lives just as I had moved on with mine. I was wrong. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. Emma and I were cooking dinner together, laughing about something her coworker had said when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick it up. Katharina's voice hit me like a physical blow. "You ruined my life, Marcus," she screamed into the phone. "You did this on purpose. You destroyed Derek's career to get back at me." I stepped away from Emma, moving into the bedroom for privacy. Katharina was crying hysterically, her words tumbling over each other in a flood of accusations and threats. She said I had deliberately sabotaged Derek's company. She said I had manipulated the evaluation to make him look bad. She said she was going to tell everyone what kind of person I really was. I waited for her to finish, then spoke calmly. I did my job, Katharina. I evaluated Technova the same way I evaluate every company. The problems I found were real. Derek's failures were documented long before I ever looked at those files. If you want to blame someone for his situation, maybe start with him. She called me names I will not repeat here, then hung up without letting me respond. The next day, my mother called. Hearing her voice after 4 years of silence was disorienting, like hearing a ghost speak. She sounded tired, older than I remembered, with none of the warmth that used to define her. "Marcus," she said, "Katharina is very upset. Derek lost his job and they are struggling. Is there anything you can do to help?" I stood in my kitchen, looking out the window at the city I had conquered without her, and felt something shift inside me. All the pain I had buried, all the anger I had suppressed, rose to the surface. "Mom, do you remember the last time we spoke? You kicked me out of the house. You chose Katharina over me. You let them accuse me of being a thief, and you said nothing. For 4 years, you never once called to see if I was alive, if I had food to eat, if I had a place to sleep. Now the first time you reach out, it is to ask me to help the people who destroyed my relationship with you." She was crying. She said things were complicated, that Gerald had pressured her, that she did not know how to fix what had happened. Excuses. The same excuses she had been making for years. "I did not do anything to hurt Derek," I said. "I did my job honestly. His failures caught up with him. That is not my fault, and it is not my responsibility to fix." There was silence on the line. Then I said the words I had been holding inside for years. "I am getting married, Mom. I found someone who loves me unconditionally, who would never ask me to keep the peace at the cost of my dignity. I hope one day you understand what that kind of love means, but I cannot wait for you to figure it out anymore." I hung up the phone and stood there for a long moment, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, triumph. But all I felt was a quiet sense of release, like setting down a weight I had been carrying for too long. Emma found me standing by the window a few minutes later. She did not ask what happened. She just wrapped her arms around me and held on until my breathing steadied. In the weeks that followed, I thought a lot about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that means pretending nothing happened or letting people back into your life who have proven they cannot be trusted. I mean the kind of forgiveness that sets you free from carrying someone else's poison inside your heart. I realized that I did not need an apology from my mother or Katharina to move forward. Their acknowledgement of what they did would not change my past or heal my wounds. The only person who could heal me was myself, with the support of the people who truly loved me. Emma and I began planning our wedding. We decided on a small ceremony, just close friends and a few family members on her side. People who had shown up for us, who had earned their place in our celebration. There would be no guilt invitations, no seats reserved for people who might cause drama. Just love and joy and the beginning of our new life together. I also started seeing a therapist, something I probably should have done years ago. Talking through my experiences with a professional helped me understand patterns I had been blind to. I learned that my need to please my mother to keep the peace at any cost came from losing my father so young and being terrified of losing her too. I learned that I was not responsible for Katharina's behavior or my mother's choices. I learned that setting boundaries is not the same as being cruel. Some people might think this story ends with revenge. They might expect me to gloat about Derek losing his job or Katharina suffering the consequences of her actions. But honestly, I do not feel any satisfaction about their struggles. I did not orchestrate their downfall. I simply lived my life with integrity, and the natural consequences of their choices caught up with them. Karma is not something we deliver to others. Karma is the universe balancing itself. Our job is to focus on being the best versions of ourselves and trust that everything else will work out as it should. If you are watching this and going through something similar, I want you to know that it gets better. The people who are meant to stay in your life will never make you feel like you have to earn their love. They will never ask you to sacrifice your dignity for their comfort. And sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is simply building a beautiful life and refusing to let the people who hurt you take up space in it. I do not know what the future holds for my mother or Katerina. Maybe one day they will reach out with genuine remorse and I will have to decide whether to let them back in. Maybe they never will, and I will have to make peace with that too. Either way, I know I will be okay. I have Emma, I have my career, I have friends who became the family I chose, and I have finally learned to love myself enough to walk away from anyone who does not. Thank you for listening to my story today. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family members who are toxic? How did you find the strength to walk away? Drop your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is struggling with the same decision. If you found value in this video, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel so you do not miss future stories. Your support means the world to me and helps us keep creating content that matters. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Remember that your worth is not determined by the people who fail to see it. You deserve love that does not come with conditions. You deserve peace that does not require you to shrink yourself. You deserve everything the beautiful this life has to offer. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing that better days are ahead.